Ladies and gentlemen, I have a difficult question for you. Are you familiar with the rules of chess? Are you sure you're familiar with the rules of chess? All right, fantastic. Now that that checkpoint has been reached, you know what happens when a pawn gets to the end of the board, right? Yes, correct. You get to punch your opponent in the face. No, just kidding. You get to turn your pawn into a queen, of course, or a rook, a bishop, or a knight. But why would they grant us these privileges, right? Why would they allow us to promote our weakest piece into our most powerful one, but who needs all the others? Well, that's the point of this video today. That's actually the entire thing that we're going to be looking at. When do you not make a queen? Now, some of you might have an answer to that question. You're like, well, duh, when it's stalemate. And with that, we're going to get into the examples. This, for example, is the best situation to explain why you would not promote a queen. If white goes here, the game ends in what is called a stalemate. It is a draw. This is the simplest example to show you where what happens if you promote a queen. The black king simply has no moves, and the game does not end in a victory for white. Instead of that, you promote to a rook. And because there is no diagonal control, the king actually just walks into a checkmate. Now, that might be the entire video right there, but then that would be on my clips channel. We are on my main channel, and I'm going to show you a handful of examples from real games in this video, why you should promote to a rook, bishop, knight, and also things to be careful about. And there's a couple of different examples, like for example, in bishop, sounds crazy because a queen has all the same power, so that wouldn't make any sense, right? A knight, you can kind of imagine, can give some checks here and there. But let's for now stick to a practical example of when to promote a rook. And we are following the game, the black pieces, all right? Black's pawns are going this way, white's pawns are going down to our side of the board. The protagonists are Juan Manuel Bellón Lopez versus Jose Garcia Padron. Now, actually, the person playing with the black pieces is the father, some of you may know, of Anna Kramling. Some of you might have seen her Twitch or YouTube channel. Yeah, that's actually her pops. And black is winning here. Black is winning 3-on-2 endgame. This king will probably just eat this pawn, and you just have to make sure this king does not get to these pawns first. So what's going to happen here is king c5. Good job of getting closer to both targets. A4, now G5, and H5. Black doesn't yet have to get to this A pawn because the king is extremely close. Now that the white pawn sneaks away, black will be, in fact, losing the race with the H pawn, right? Because this pawn is 2 squares away from promotion. So the black king has only really one way to go, and it's back to stop the pawn. Now that that pawn has been stopped, it is time for white to begin the journey over to capturing the pawns over here, right? So we have this. And it looks like a grim situation for black because, well, what can you do, right? I mean, you're going to push something, and all your pawns are going to get caught. But there is one and only one winning variation here for black. If you'd like to, by the way, train your pawn endgame calculation skills, now is the time to do it. Pause the video. This king will not be involved. Actually, the funny thing is, if this king tries to get involved, you're going to actually lose the game. So you'll lose all 3 pawns. So you basically leave it up to these pawns to either win you the game or draw you the game. So that's it, right? One of them will probably end up being traded, then you either lose both pawns or you don't. So black begins with h4, okay? You have to begin with this because now white has to move the pawn, otherwise you promote here. So, oh, wait, what? Whoa, I don't understand. Didn't I just say this has to happen? Well, if that were to happen, white can now no longer take on f5. White has to go here, and actually, white is stuck. White cannot take the pawn because this pawn would go, and then by the time white gets around to attacking this pawn, this king either arrives or both pawns just bully the king to death. This is a very well-known endgame when pawns defend like this, like in a knight formation, right? The king cannot take one of the pawns because the other one will go, and the king cannot get closer to the other pawn at all because that pawn will just run. And by the time the king does this whole dance, the other pawn also walks forward as well. But that's not what happened in the game. I just said that the pawn would have to move. So what's this? What's that move all about? King takes f5. Well, Jose Garcia Padron thought that he came up with a defensive strategy, and it was to run the king to a stalemate situation. And at this point, if the only legal move was this, it's just a draw. If you move the king, it's a draw. If you move the pawn, you have to take the right pawn, but it's also a draw. But you can promote to something else. Now, if you promote to a bishop here, you're still winning, okay? This is still a winning endgame because there is this, and this is defended, right? But if you promote to a knight, there's this, and actually the pawn is lost. So one of the pawns would have to survive, and Bayonne Lopez just made a rook. And now there is one free getaway square, and white decided that he was happy to resign in this position because he believed that his opponent would successfully be able to checkmate with king and rook. But rook is not the most exciting, right? I mean, a rook at the end of the day, it's simple. As long as the square that the king is trying to escape to is not a diagonal, you know, kind of in the diagonal position, then okay, you're just going to make a rook. That's no problem at all. But in our next 3 examples, we are going to talk about knights. And the first game we're going to look at is a real game. This happened in the Olympiad between Hikaru Nakamura and Vladimir Kramnik. When I was looking at under promotion games, Hikaru was all over the place. And we're going to begin right here. This is like nearing kind of the end game. And what happens now is the players begin a race. C5, F5, E5, C6, E4, right? I mean, both sides just avalanche of pawns, right? Bishop H3 trying to attack the pawn over there, trying to win the pawn. White says no. Rook back to F8, defending his own pawn, trying to win the pawn. The pawn comes forward. All right? King F1, E3. I mean, this is a nail biter, right? At the end of the day, we have E2 on the way. We have F3 on the way. Bishop F2 on the way. All these pawns are coming, and that pawn is going as well. And probably black will have to sacrifice his entire rook for it. So Hikaru plays King E2 and develops a little bit of a blockade, all right? And now, after Rook A7 check, and we have just a little bit of a dance here. What ends up happening is the pawn goes, okay? C7. And the king cannot get close because this bishop covers, and that is covered as well. However, there is a tactic here. And the tactic for black would be the move E2. And the move E2 is incredible because if white takes it, then there is F3 check and you lose your pawn. This is a draw. So if the king takes on E2, then that doesn't work, right? E2, king E2, that doesn't work. If you make a queen, then this is check and black wins. It's not a draw. Black wins because white is stuck in a mating net. And white will get checkmated in a few moves. So what's going on after E2? This is incredible. You're threatening this. Well, Hikaru does take the pawn. But first, Hikaru creates a knight check. This is incredible. And by winning some time on Vladimir Kramnik, he adds a piece. He now has a full piece that he did not have in this position to the board. And because of that, this no longer comes with a discovered attack on anything. And after Hikaru is able to kind of reconfigure the setup to his position, he just has 2 extra knights. Knights and a bishop will defeat just a lone bishop. A knight and a bishop on their own will not, but 2 knights will. And this takes a little bit of time. I mean, Hikaru does in fact have to take some time, does in fact win the pawn, and slowly but surely tries to either win this one as well or use it as a shield to get this king completely stranded on the edge of the board. Now, you may notice in this position, Hikaru could have played knight takes F4. I'm actually not exactly sure what the evaluation of the position is after knight takes F4. Like, I would imagine that there are winning chances, but if you notice, black actually kind of doesn't have a move here. Sort of a weird situation, like with the king. The king cannot move at all. And in many ways, you almost want to preserve a pawn on the board for black because the pawn can be used as a problem. Like, the best example I can give you is it's well known that in the endgame of 2 knights versus king, it's a draw. But sometimes 2 knights versus pawn is a win because there's like a trick where you put the king in a stalemate, but there's still a legal move with the pawn. Very complicated stuff. And Hikaru masterfully dances around the pawn and creates a mating net for the king. And basically checkmates Kramnik. Like, completely barricades his king, and Kramnik resigns because there's nothing. And the threat is basically to give a check and mate him like this. So, incredible tactical sequence all the way back to in the early 60s of the game, promoting to a knight with check. I mean, just wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. A piece on the board with a tempo. And I have another example actually from a Gotham sub-game. This is one of the games that inspired this entire video of promoting to a knight. This was amazing. Like, this is one of the coolest ones that I've seen. And this is a game between two like 1500s. White here plays the move E6. Now, E6 is a mistake on its own, but we're not here to analyze all the best moves. It's a mistake because the king can go up this way. But in the game, the king went back this way to naturally prevent the pawn from queening, right? And also to unpin from certain situations. Now, one of the reasons why the king had to go here and not here is because after e7, this pawn cannot be stopped. Okay, there is no king f7, because after king f7, I take your rook, and you have to choose which one you're going to take. But after e7, rook d6, I think you see where we're going with this. I think you see that in this position, there is e8 knight, which is a savage move. That is brilliant. And black loses the rook and will lose this endgame most likely. I mean, you don't know, right? 1500s are capable of many, many things. I feel like there's 7 possible results of this game. White winning, black winning, someone having, you know, a heart attack, God forbid, at the board. I mean, just really like someone losing on time, someone walking into a pool with their phone in their pocket. I've done that before. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of different results. But that doesn't happen, unfortunately. And somehow in this position, Gotham Sub just promoted to a queen, which naturally seems like something you would want to do here, right? A full queen. You say, Levy, why don't I just make a queen? Because you're mated. You're mated if you make a queen. You say, Levy, no, I'm not. Just sack my queen. That's what happened in the game. But it's minus 51 here. If black finds bishop takes g4. Rook g4. And you're still pinned. And when the dust settles, one person's pawn advances. We just saw this kind of typical endgame stuff in the Bayonne Lopez game, right? The pawn just runs. So black is winning. If e8 queen happens, black actually has a winning position. But what ends up happening in the game is, well, typical 1400 stuff. The queen gets taken, and this is just an equal endgame, and they went on to draw. So blunders galore. But incredible that making a full queen here loses you the game with rook h6, but promoting to a knight with a check and then taking wins you the game. Amazing. Just super. There is one, though, very famous example of when promoting to a knight went super wrong. And I remember this game. This is actually a very, very famous kind of game. It was a blitz game between Mamedyarov and actually Hikaru again. And Hikaru has a lot of these under promotion things. This is also, he's part of being a streamer, right? He has a lot of like very cool and interesting games. There was this game that Hikaru had black. And he was well on his way to a draw against Mamedyarov. I mean, rook and two, but you just play, right? I mean, you just play, you see what happens. Maybe you have an opportunity to trick your opponent. Rook a2, king f3, and it looks like, you know, black is creating some actual substantial threats here. And I think Hikaru actually did build up a winning advantage. He took on a7, took on g5, and here he has a winning position actually in this endgame. King f2, all winning, and the reason this is winning is black is 3 squares away from queening. White is a lot of squares away, 5. All right, that's a lot more than 3 in a game of chess. Time is very important in a chess game. But then Hikaru started going astray. So here he can win with f3. For example, if we have h5, rook h1 is a winning idea because white doesn't have a whole lot of moves. Black will play king f1 on the next move. Then, for example, if king e3, you play f2, you deflect the king, and probably you just win. But it's blitz. Crazy stuff is going to happen, right? So instead of that, Hikaru plays rook a3. Okay, this allows Mamedyarov to play h5, which loses the game. What Mamedyarov should have played was rook g4 first, or rook f5 first. And now there is no time to go here. And if you go here, you've blocked the path. So he had to do that first. Instead of that, we get it this way, and black is winning again. Okay, king d3. Now we have king e1, rook here, king f1. We have king g2. Why Hikaru did not play f2 with check? I don't know. It happens. It's just I mean, it's just winning, right? King d2, for example, king g1 wins the game. I mean, if you do this, actually no, that does not win the game because actually, in fact, there is check. King g2 would probably still. Would king g2 win the game? Wait a minute. King g2, king e2. Where is the win? Where is the win? Where is the win? Rook h2. This wins the game. Preemptively defending your pawn and preparing king g1, rook g2. That's the win. For example, if king here, now the king can move. Yes. So the reason you cannot rush with king g1 or king g2, depending on, there's a defense, right? Rook h2 first. Very tough to see with seconds on the clock. Even I just got stumped in the middle of my own video. That's the only winning idea. You have to preemptively guard your pawn. That doesn't happen because they're playing a blitz game, right? King g2, f2, king e2. And now Hikaru's probably frustrated. He's like, oh my God. He's going to make a queen, and then it's going to be takes, and the players agree to a draw. Or he can make a rook. It's going to be takes, the players agree to a draw. Or he can make a bishop. Check. It's going to be takes, draw. Instead of that, Hikaru makes a knight. Because he can make anything, right? Now check this out. check. That move was not possible if any other piece had promoted. Bishop and queen would have been check, and a rook would have covered that square. Now Mamedyarov is taking the knight with check, and he's checking again. And now we have this position. Now Hikaru's losing potentially. It's equal. It's equal. And actually, the craziest thing is it's equal, and Hikaru can just keep his king here. The white king cannot get close. He cannot cross. So technically, this is Zugzwang. I mean, there's a couple of moments here that are a bit scary, but this is Zugzwang. Like, if Hikaru plays king h2, king h3, white cannot do anything. Like, you can give checks, you can go here, you can give... Like, there's no way for white to cross. If you play rook g4, there's rook h6. So the craziest thing is, Hikaru is still drawing, but he must have been so rattled by being winning and then blundering with f1 knight and giving Mamedyarov winning chances that he allows Mamedyarov to walk the king to f7 and win! Oh my goodness. Insane. I don't know what I would have done after a game like this. Probably thrown my phone at something. I mean, if I was playing over the board, I wouldn't have thrown my phone at something. Yeah, I mean... So that's what happens there. Tragic. I mean, just absolutely, yeah, I mean, crazy. Like, you go all the way back, right? I mean, rook and 1 versus rook and 1, and then you just promote a knight, like, absent-mindedly, you know, he's gonna take. And then Mamedyarov finds rook f2, rook, I mean, it's just crazy. Absolutely crazy. You gotta be very careful with these promotions. We're now going to take a look at 3 examples of the rarest promotion in chess, the bishop promotion. Now, the bishop promotion is extremely rare because if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. The queen has the power of the bishop. But if you're not going to make a queen, you might as well make a rook. And if you're not going to make a rook, you probably are in a situation you need a knight. There is literally no situation where you would need a bishop. Or is there? That's why we're here. This was a game between Anton Guijarro and Vladislav Kovalyov. This was played in, or Kovalev? Kovalev? Probably not Kovalyov, because there is a Kovalyov. Anton Kovalyov. He's from Canada. Is this Kovalev? I don't know. What I do know is that this was played in the Rapid Chess Championship, and for a long time in this game, Kovalev was putting some pressure, right? He has 2 passed pawns, and he is trying to promote them, but white is somehow staying very close to both. And the draw here is this. This is a draw because the king is the wrong color corner of the enemy bishop. This is a well-known theoretical draw. You say, Levy, I didn't know that this was well-known. Don't worry about it. I don't know a lot of things in chess either. I just happen to know this one. It's like my trivia party trick. So king d4, king e4, and now, you know, you're going to see a little problem that arises here. By the time black gets to this position, white still has this move. Somehow, this cannot be taken with anything because it's stalemate. But there is this, right? But now white goes here. Now, you fork me. And you can't make a queen because it's stalemate. You also cannot make a rook because it's stalemate. You cannot make a knight because I'm just going to take on h2, right? Now, actually, I think Table Base finds a way to win this with black. Table Base, the solved chess program of 7 pieces or less, many, many terabytes of space, if not more, says that this is winning by black in like 40 moves. That's like impossible to see as a human. And the game actually ended with d1 queen. I don't know if he didn't have under promotion on, but you just think it's a draw because white is going to win on the h2 pawn. But the most insane thing about this position is d1 bishop is the only winning move. Because after knight h2, there is king g3. King g1 runs into check. You would have to lose your knight. So here, and king f2, and the white knight is just out of moves. The whole position is out of moves, but there's never a threat of stalemate. For example, white would go knight f3 or knight f1. Like, if the position was one where, let's say, this was the situation, maybe, like bishop back to b8. Well, in this position, there is still knight g4 check. Because if you take it's a draw, it's stalemate. But the way it would happen in the game is that white would need to surrender the control of his knight in a move and then get mated. So in a crazy turn of events, d1 bishop, losing your last pawn, is the only move that actually practically wins this game. That is ludicrous. That is insane. That like almost never happens. But I got 2 more examples for you. This example is a missed opportunity. This happened in the Reykjavik Open 2022 between Johan Hjartarson, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, or Hjartarson, versus Mads Andersen. That name is a little bit easier to pronounce, Danish name. I believe Johan is Icelandic name. And this was the position after something like 50 moves. And here, white is up 2 pawns, this is hanging, so he pushed it forward and tried to go on and attack the black king. But black actually got very quick counterplay, and after a long period of harassment, managed to win one pawn and actually managed to draw the game, despite being 2 pawns down. Well, in this position, there is the absolutely incredible, you can pause, by the way, if you'd like to find it, there is an absolutely incredible move by white, which is the sacrifice of a queen. That move on its own is findable, but it's this position that's the problem. Because if you take and promote to a queen, black sacrifices his queen and makes a stalemate draw. Black is down 18 points of material, which I'm sure you're familiar with that situation. But black forces the draw masterfully. Black can also play this move, which is amazing. And actually, knight takes is still a draw. The king cannot move, the pawn cannot move. So that's the issue. And you can't make a rook, because if you make a rook, then you're goofy, you lose this. If you make a knight, you lose the rook also. Which is why you have to make a bishop. Insane. And now the king can go back there. You get more material, and white now has a rook, pawn, bishop, and a knight for a queen. So white is up 3 points of material, but it's worse than that. White is threatening rook g7, and if you give a check and I go to like h2, for example, I'm also threatening bishop g6 and rook d8. It's just mate. You can go back, I'll give you a check, king e7, and then I'll go here. And that's it, the game is over. White wins. This is not a game that black can ever win, or fight back, or draw, or anything. F takes e8. Bishop is the critical move. And it was missed. I mean, if you find that, you don't have to play any chess again. Like, honestly, if you sack a queen and then have the foresight to envision the fact that promoting to a bishop wins you the game, I think FIDE just gives you some title, like just chess god, and that's it. Like, that you don't have to ever play another tournament again. I'm honestly just hoping they do that, because I probably won't be a GM anytime soon, so I'm just hoping they give me some title. Incredible. I mean, I've never seen something like that in my life. I've never seen something like the last thing in my life. I never saw something like this in my life. The next one is just bad manners. I mean, if you made it 22 minutes into the video, I gotta reward you a little bit, because I try to make my videos compelling. Are they compelling? Mr. Beast once told me you have to make every second of your video compelling. I hope I make them compelling with, various jokes, funny things on the board, vocal inflections, and so on. But yeah, so this is a funny position, because this happened in the US Championship, and if Fabiano Caruana had promoted a queen here, he would have thrown the game away with knight c7 check. Instead of that, he wants to promote a queen when this is check. So of course this move wins. And then he makes this, there is no fork, and he would win the game. But instead of doing either of those things, he BM'd his opponent over the board, live, and promoted to a bishop with check, which is one of the most savage final moves of any game I've ever seen. I mean, you need a little bit of fun, right, as well, in chess, right? So he took his pawn, he put it on g8, and he promoted to a bishop. And Ray Robson resigned, because Ray Robson was like, this SOB. Like, because if you take, now it's the same situation. And the crazy thing is there's no tricks here. I mean, the trick is that you're just going to lose all your pieces. So, yeah, brutal. I mean, absolutely brutal. And for a final game, I wanted to show you a game played in the mid-20th century in the Soviet Union. I believe this game was played. And this game is like a monster final boss of under promotion. So we have an endgame where white has a lot of pawns and black has 3, and they're very immobile, okay? And white will slowly try to walk the king into here, eat a couple pawns, take a couple of pawns to go, and try to use the overwhelming pawn majority that white will have on every side of the board. White will have 1 on 0, 2 on 1, and 2 on 1. Black tries to fight back here, okay? Zurakhov, trying to just use this pawn as a permanent decoy. That pawn will permanently make black immobile, and just advancing on both sides of the board. Now, Stockfish might show a way to hold this, but this looks incredibly difficult to hold with black. Black trying to dance around and find some defenses. There you go, right? So now this pawn is still anchoring the knight. You can go king g5, but then I take and promote. So we have king a5, but the pawn has fallen, but now 2 pawns have fallen over there, right? So it's everything I mentioned. We have 1, 1, and 2 on 1. There is no way a knight can stop all these pieces. Just no way. That's it. It just looks like a game that's going to be very easily decided by the fact. Uh-oh. If you make a queen, there is a fork. If you make a rook, there is a fork. And the worst part is you cannot do nothing because I'm attacking your pawn. You have to move. But you're an experienced watcher of this video already. You know what white played here. White played g8 knight, right? That's what white did. White made a knight. But this is hardly over. Every knight promotion we've seen so far has ended the game virtually. This is still knight versus 2 pawns. And those 2 pawns are very close to being lost. Black can sacrifice for one of them. For example, like how easy this is to draw accidentally. Look, knight e3, king d4, knight f5. Suddenly I'm harassing your pawn. You get too close. I go, we just literally are making a draw, right? I'm going to win your pawn. We're going to make a draw. It's so easy to screw this up. So white begins the winning process all over again. All right, white needs to trade knights to win, which is what white is trying to do. Black is just not letting the pawns go forward. And white has the luxury of potentially trading one of the pawns and winning the king and pawn endgame. So slowly, white begins making progress. The pawns are moving up the board once again. And the next thing that queens will decide the game. Next thing that promotes, next thing that queens, right? Will just become a rook or a queen or, oh my goodness, 4 knights in one game. Can you believe this? Now, white could have probably like played king c5 here, and white probably could have played a lot of moves and tried to make a queen. But in this position, if you had played queen, there would have been this. And if you had played rook, there would have been this. But he promotes to another, oops. He promotes to another knight. 2 under promotions in one game. Both of them to knights. I've never seen anything like this. And that's why I wanted to share it with you. And the game ended in 80 moves as the last pawn was going to go. And I think black just did not want to be the recipient of another knight under promotion. Although obviously that one wouldn't have worked because if you promote to a knight here, it's a draw. But the existence of one more pawn. For example, like here, you know, well, I guess that's mate in 1. So let's just make a hypothetical situation. I think 3 knights beat 1, but you really don't want to have this battle. All right, so yeah, black got to this position and decided that they had had enough. Yeah, Zurakov, as far as I know, becomes the only person to have ever promoted twice in one game, and both times to knights. The only person that has had 4 knights in one game. I hope you enjoyed this video, folks. Very fun one. Now you know when to not promote to a queen, sometimes when to promote to a rook, sometimes when to promote to a knight, and if you accidentally manage to promote to a bishop successfully in a game, you're just a chess god. I don't know what else to tell you. On that note, I will see you in the next video. Get out of here.